Alrighty, welcome to another episode of the One Last Cast podcast. My name is Jonathan, and as always, we have Merriel Solesky here. Say hi, Merriel.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Well, it's another episode. We're going to go into offshore kayak fishing. I know if you haven't listened to our last episode, we were supposed to go into offshore. Well, we did go into offshore kayak fishing, but our guest Blake just was such a great storyteller. We just went into Los Buzos and his experience there, and we really didn't get to the offshore kayak fishing part that we
Right.
wanted to talk about. But uh, definitely go check that out. It was a very interesting conversation about his experiences at Los Buzos and all the rooster fish and they couldn't find the snapper they're looking for, but all the kind of fish they're catching out there, and it's just a really good conversation to listen to. So go ahead and check that out. Before we get into today's episode, let's give a shout out to our sponsors, Dirty South Kayak Anglers, DSKA. If you're looking for a Facebook group to kind of hang out, talk kayak fishing all around the Texas coast, including offshore and inshore, go to Dirty South Kayak Anglers. Great group of people over there. 4A Printing, they do our custom towels and stuff like that. I got a new set of towels in from Aaron. He does great work, and I need Merrill. I need to get you some so that you can distribute to your people if you want. Have plenty of that, and also Knocking Tail Lures, our favorite soft plastic. We've been using it for inshore. I'm sure they work offshore, and they've been great for trout, redfish, and flounder. Looking forward to this upcoming flounder season. Gonna definitely stock up on even some more to use then. Before we get into offshore stuff, Meryl, let's set the stage a little bit. I know recently you've been offshore in your kayak. Let's kind of talk about the experience, and then we'll bring Blake on.
Which time are you talking about? No, I'm
The
just kidding. I'm just kidding. I just teasing. I just teasing. Now, so hey, did we ever? Quick question though. Did we ever give away the bait? I don't remember.
Oh,
Just
yes. I have the winner selected. I haven't posted it yet. It's literally
oh,
ready. It's
okay.
ready to go. So, yeah, we have a giveaway from a couple episodes ago. Unfortunately, it's closed, and we gave away some baits from Kyle Manick, one of our guests before. So be on the lookout. Literally right after this episode airs. So,
Yeah, yeah. Some random selected named Merrill Solesky won these baits. What are the odds? No,
what are
I'm
the
just kidding.
odds?
I was teasing. I was just teasing. Now, yeah. So I one of the things I do is I'm gonna tell you about the story. I took my kayak down south and Corpus. I'm working on a project down there, Airbnb for us kayakers and fishermen down there. I'm trying to get us a little spot down there. So I took my kayak down there, and another friend of mine, Martin, has a kayak too. And I was looking at the weather, and the weather wasn't matching up to what I was seeing on Friday, I think it was, or Thursday or Friday. I'm not too sure. So I said, you know what? Let's try to get in the next day, but let's bring our stuff and be ready to go first thing in the morning if we see that window. So the app was saying 1 to 2s, which is okay. I'm okay with 1 to 2s, right? But I'm taking somebody with me that's never been offshore. So I was gonna help push them through. Help. There's a way to help guys push them through the surf and get them out there. And the whole point was to check to see if there's kingfish in this area. So we get out there, and the weather was cooperating. We get out there. The guy I was with was eager. Said, if we drop our baits now, we're most likely going to catch either sharks or jacks. We might get lucky and catch, a king, maybe. But let's just head closer to this rig. So, I'm not hiding anything, no secrets. We're at Bob Haw, heading towards the first rig. I don't like dropping my baits until I'm more like three, not when I can start where I feel like I'm pretty close to the rig or I'm past the rig, heading to the second rig. So those are the times I like to drop my baits in that area. I'm not saying you can't catch them. People are catching them off the jetties. So, I mean, they come in real close. This is where I prefer to drop baits. So I dropped, actually I have the bait that I dropped with it right here, one of them. And so I dropped my bait, first drop, boom, fish was on right by the rig. I was like, oh, that's great. Brought him up real quick. Second one was a bigger one. I was actually fortunate with that one. That one actually kind of ran towards me and did one little dive, and they came back up and ran towards me again. As I see them coming in the kayak, I'm reeling down. So I had my gaff already ready because I just caught that first one. So I reach around, grab my gaff, his back tail flips in. So like when I turn my gaff around and I bring him in, and literally lands right on the cooler bag in the front end. Open it up, shove him in there, and he just fought like crazy in there. But I had my bag strapped down, so I didn't really get to fight that second one for his weight. Right, that was supposed to be a good fight, and I'm supposed to fight him for at least another 5 minutes. But sometimes you get that opportunity. Uh, be careful with the gaff, right? It's sharp, but it was just one of those situations where I think the fish gods blessed me and gave me that killer instinct opportunity. So I took full advantage of it. The third one was on my like either fourth drop or third or fourth drop. Martin had a run, so I went to go with him. He was close by, checked him. It got off. So I dropped it again, and sure enough, they were caught another one. And this is all before 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock. And I was like, man, I felt the wind. The swell's getting a little bigger. I was like, we could try and shoot for the other rig, but we're like kind of like halfway. We could probably book it back in about an hour. We'll be back there on the shore in an hour. Wind's starting to pick up. He's like, no, I'm cool with that, and we got our fish. Well, I gave him the fish, but, we made our way back in. He flipped, but he when he flipped on the second sandbar, he looked up at me and I was like, stand up. And he stood up. He was like, oh. I was like, yeah, it's not that deep. Good thing about down there is these sandbars are a little bit more helpful versus Florida, sandbars. Some of those Florida sandbars, they just drop and whatever. But that area is a pretty good area. So he actually, what happened is the first wave picked him up and then picked up his back end and pushed him sideways. And then when he was trying to come back straight, it was too late. The next wave already picked him up and then rolled him. So he rolled and he was trying to, I think he was more worried about losing some of his stuff, but I made sure everything was strapped down. So when you got everything strapped down, don't worry about your kayak flipping upside down or anything like that, because you've taken the extra steps and precautions to make sure everything was strapped down. So I helped him get back. We flipped the kayak over. We're standing up in water, drug it in. I went in first, parked the yak on the beach, and then wait for him to come in. When I saw that, I looked at him, and I guess he knew that I knew that he was about to roll over. So it's kind of like one of those situations. He rolled over and told him stand up.
So he didn't lose anything, right?
No. He only had one rod. I took because everything was on my kayak, right?
Yeah.
With him, he also had a Hobie, the old school ones. The old school Outbacks, the 2018s or 17s.
Man, old school. Gosh, the
older, not the old school, but the older models, and those handles waves really well because the way they're designed.
Yeah.
The front end, it's able to pick up and go over those waves a lot better.
Yeah.
Then versus the newer model, it just punches right through those waves, and all that water just comes straight at you. I think I got a video I posted not too long ago, about a year ago, where it my cell phone, I was trying to go live, my cell phone just fell in the water. I took a drink because all the water that came over, but I had a float on it and it was tethered, so I was lucky. But yeah, that was my fishing. That was my kingfish, and I did that check for the fishing trip that we have planned coming up, which we have more information about. And so the kingfish are there. So that was the whole purpose of that trip, to make sure the kingfish were there, and they're there.
Awesome. Well, let's go into some more of our offshore fishing talk. Last time we talked a lot about Los Buzos, but let's go more into in-depth and detail of kayak fishing offshore and going BTB. So we're going to bring back Blake here. How's it going, Blake?
Hey guys, how's it going?
How's it going, Blake? Good to have you, bud.
Yeah, good to have you back. We were talking actually before this. We hopped on. We had a little pre-production meeting, and we're going to go into some of the conditions, and before we go into rigging and gear, and then kind of go into some more stuff afterwards. But I guess one of the things that Merriel was talking about his story is he understanding the conditions before heading out there. Obviously, a lot of us don't live on the coast. We have to depend on technology and other stuff to tell us, is it going to be a good day to go offshore? So I guess you and Merrill, because I am not the expert on this offshore stuff, what are we looking for, and what tools do we use to figure out, is it a good day to go offshore?
I'll let you go first, Blake. Go ahead and tell me how you would tackle on going offshore, and how would you handle that?
Well, okay, so we don't live in Corpus Christi, so it's a long drive for us. We have to take that into consideration. Down there, they're going, it's not the most optimal conditions. We could pull it off. It's going to be a little rough on the water, but for them, even if they get out there and they find out it's a rough day and they got to turn around, either go home or hit inshore, it's not a big deal because it's a 20, 30-minute drive. For us, just to get to Corpus Christi from Houston is a 3.5-hour drive. So we have to be a little bit more selective unless we just don't care. What I do is I've got several apps loaded on my phone, and I look at all of those different apps to choose between the weather, the conditions, the winds, if there's any rip tides and stuff. And sometimes you can't even really, they don't give you much information on that. You don't find out until you're there. But you take all those things into consideration and stuff. So if it's experienced people, I would say like waves in the surf, you're looking 2 to 3, and we could do more than that. But typically, I mean, if I find 4s, but I'm seeing the swells are low enough for me to get out, I might find a 4. I'm getting older and lazier now. So I'm just like, where 5s might've been like, come on, let's do this. Now I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like getting beat up, but, I guess that's my old age setting in. I don't know, maybe when I turned 50, I started being like that. But so anyways, now when you're looking at new people, well, that's just the wave. So like experienced people, we're going to want to look at low swells, just because a swell might say 2 or 3 foot. But if it's every 6 or 7 seconds, you're not even going to notice that. I mean, that's just a very slow roller. And even when we were at Los Buzos, we had some pretty big swells, but because it took so long for that swell to pull over, you almost didn't even really notice it. But it might have been an 8-footer, but because it took forever to get through, you didn't even notice it was that high. And I did, because I was like, wow, look at that thing over there. And I just sat there and I stopped fishing for a minute just to notice it and just see how long it took. And I was like, man, that's kind of cool. And we do get those over here every now and then. It's just we don't pay much attention to it because, as experienced BTVers, we are used to it. Our bodies are acclimated to it, and we don't even have to look at the stuff. Right, we just feel it with the way the water is most of the times. We're looking for winds. I think everybody's optimal point is 15 miles an hour and lower. There are some that'll go out more than that. I don't typically like to do more than 15. But I have done it. I've even gone out where it might have been 10, 15, and all of a sudden later in the day, it was supposed to be going down or staying the same. And all of a sudden you're at 20 plus and you're like, where'd this come from? But, you're already out there. So you got to make a decision. Is this great? Or do we, put everything up and head back in? It just really depends. If the swells are low and the winds are up, then we're going to continue fishing. We're looking at, of course, weather is always an important thing. Having our VHF radio, so where we can get to NOAA weather radio, we can check that station out and see if we see something off in the distance. Is it coming our way? Is it not? And they'll get those short weather reports, and we can make a decision on whether or not we continue to fish. If you remember, Merriel, we went out for, I believe you were on that trip when we went to Surfside and we were going to the 5-mile rig. And weren't you on that trip where all of a sudden we had a couple of water spouts in the background? Was that your trip?
Yeah, that was my group. Yeah, that was our group. Yeah.
Yep. And I remember, because we're like, everybody cut lines or pull it in or whatever. We're turning around. This is done. One, and then the second one started forming. Merriel's like, I'll be with y'all. I'm in the middle of fighting a fish. And
yes.
Like,
yep.
Oh man, but we all got back safely and stuff. They were way off in the distance, and you just never know, Because I mean, it may look like far off, but I mean, those things can sneak up on you real quick. And there was no way. I mean, there's no weather forecast that's going to be able to tell you if those are going to show up. I mean, we had a clear day, and out of the middle of nowhere, that thing just showed up, and we're 4.5, 5 miles offshore out at the rig out there. So you just got to look at your surroundings and pay attention. Just because weatherman says it's a great day, I mean, that goes back to the old saying, you know, the weatherman is the only person that can get it wrong every single day and still get paid a lot of money to do it. So, you know, you take it for what it's worth and a grain of salt and watch your surroundings and hope for the best and stuff. Now, new people, like I while y'all were talking about the story that Merriel was talking about, I pulled up the forecast for. So Bob Hall is supposed to happen on Saturday, unless things are bad. Then we'll push it out into the week, and if it's bad there, we'll push it into the weekend, and so on and so on. So right now it's looking at, and yesterday it was showing 2 to 3s in the morning on Saturday, and through the rest of the day it was kind of like I'm sorry, 3 and 4, and then it was dropping to 2 and 3s. Today, different story. It's now back to 3s and 4s in the surf, and that's not really good for anybody. I mean, experienced people can make it through that, but I'm not going out in that. Just not very much fun. So swells are averaging 3.8 every 6 seconds. That's a lot of movement in the water. I mean, you're going to have to be watching your 6 constantly through the day, making sure that you don't get like a secondary swell coming in there to kind of throw you off kilter and knock you in the water. Winds are above 15 with gusts in the 22 mile an hour. And even early in the week, it's 25, 26 miles an hour. So if this holds true come Thursday, we're going to be pushing it out into the week and stuff. And I know a lot of people are weekend warriors, can't get out in the week. It's not really my decision well, I mean, it is, but I'm not going to put people out in unsafe conditions. We're just going to push it out and be safe and everything. That's what this is about, is to teach new people. And I want them to have a good time and not lose gear, get possibly hurt and stuff out there. So, those are the kind of conditions we're looking for. 2s, and I think 2s or less for new people. Winds, I don't really want to be pushing 15. I'd rather kind of keep it 10 to 13 or lower. Swells, it just varies depending on the seconds to the wave height. But, if it's a slow roller, we're fine with those. We just don't want a lot of chop. But, if we get it, that's fine. Just not a lot of it and stuff. But, and of course, obviously good weather out there. No storms and rains and hurricanes. So,
Yeah.
what about
and,
you?
Yeah, me. My stories.
Before we go on, I just want to mention that we do have the link for the Bob Hall trip on our chat right now. It's Texas Kayak Fishing, and of course, those who are listening, we are live every other Tuesday. We try to be. So we're live on Facebook.com/One Last Cast Podcast. If you're interested in joining this trip that Blake is talking about, just go to TexasKayakFisherman.com and search the Bob Hall trip. You'll find it in the BTP section, and he'll have updates there. But yeah, Merriel, I definitely want to hear what your thoughts on are for a good conditions and how to find them.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of people that are reaching out to me about this trip. So me or Blake. Blake's the one that's running this trip, but I'll answer the questions as best as I can. So just contact us. My best way to reach me is just by my messenger. That's how y'all been reaching me. So, but what I use is I used to use Magic Seaweed. Now it's Surfline, Windfinder, and if I see the wind low enough and the swell's low enough, like maybe 2 to 3s or 1 to 2s, and I go out there and look, like I won't go out there and look if it's showing like 4 to 5s, like in big winds, right? And I can feel the wind coming in, right? I'm not even going to bother to check. Joshua brings up a good one. The saltwater recon. You could check on the map. Some of the cameras they got along the coast. I have used those. Surfline used to have those up, but none of the cameras seems like they work. So, those are the ones that I use. I used to use Tides for fishing, but the website always got crazy. The weather was never even. It was just never a good, reliable one. So I don't think there is a reliable one, but for me to say, hey, I want to go check it out, it would be if I see it on Windfinder and Surfline and Saltwater Recon. I use those three ones to say, hey, it looks good enough. Let me go check it out. My best way is actually making my way to the water and seeing the water myself, looking at it and seeing how far the swells there are. But I won't go out there unless they're like 2 to 3s and below. But if I'm just starting off, I'd be 1 to 2s, and the wind that I would choose is below 10. Either flat or 1 to 2s. But even 1 to 2s, it can be with the higher wind, it could be a little bit. Those swells can be closer together and be a little bit of a problem. Flat would be the most optimal time to go. But yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, and I will add that even though I don't go offshore as much, I think one of the better tools that I've used, and actually, Blake, during our pre-production meeting, we were talking about it. That you made me think about it. I look at the conditions using a lot of like wind finder and all the other stuff inshore, and then especially like for example, you have a front come through, and I'm trying to figure out has that water pushed out yet from those cold fronts that we have during the fall and winter. I will look at the weather, and then I look over at the NOAA website for those buoys that are out there. Like for example, over the Galveston Railroad Bridge, they have a pretty accurate buoy there, and I can see, oh yeah, that tide's less dropping because tide predictors can only tell you so much. And I know they have offshore buoys that give you really good, accurate, up to date information on the current conditions. Obviously, it doesn't really help you forecast it, but if based upon your knowledge of, hey, it looks like it's gonna be really low winds, the predictions as swells are going to be pretty are far apart, they're not going to be too high, I would double check that with the current conditions, like of a buoy that they have out there to say, hey, that's what the conditions are supposed to be right now. It looks favorable now, so it's probably right.
Yeah.
So
Unless you're talking about the buoy that's by Port Mansfield that Blake doesn't like too much. It's too close for the inlet for him. What's up? What's up, Jeremy? Glad you could join us, buddy.
Yep. So I guess so now we have the conditions, and I know last time we kind of briefly talked about kind of launching, and getting out there. But let's just go out there. We're out there now, and we're trying to go after some kingfish or jacks or whatever we're trying to get our hands on. Kind of let's talk about a little bit about the rigging and the gear that we would need to have a successful trip.
I'll start off with mine because I think mine will probably be a lot shorter than Blake's. Me, I would probably gear wise, I'd probably have. I use Italica, and the reason I use Italica is because I can set it doesn't go from no strike to strike, right? It's an open face conventional reel. I can actually put certain amount of pressure on the fish as much as I'd like. Right, versus setting the drag and then it's either one or the other. This one I'm allowed to add certain kind of pressure and dial it in. So I like to set my drag a certain way when I'm trolling. So I use the Italica for that. I also use a spinning rod. I use a Stella. I use a trolling rod, a Therese, and I got a Game Type J, and I have there's another good rod that I use. But Therese, I think they have a really good trolling rod setup. I know I'm forgetting the name of the other one. You help me out with that one, Blake? Not the Therese, but the other one, the trolling rod that Shimano makes.
Oh,
the Game Type J is more for J is more for jigging, but I use that like when I'm doing the snappers for jigging for snappers, snapper. But
yeah, you're putting me on the spot. I've lost my train of thought.
Not Terramar. Well, regardless, I use the trolling rod, so that I use that for my spinning. I also have a Tran X, and I do the Tran X one for sight casting. If I see like kingfish or bait blowing up on the top, big fish blow ups, I'm throwing a popper out there and I'm popping it in that bait caster. I also use bucktail jigs for cobia, stuff like popper like that. That's a good one right there. I also use bucktail with the grub on it or some kind of bucktail for cobia if I see them on a buoy or see them, with another species or see them around some stuff. I'll use that Tran X for sight casting. So, and then I got a couple other reels I use, but those pretty much cover my bases if I'm going offshore. And I like using those reels just because of the drags on those reels. They're very helpful to me. And they help me out. And that as far as just my rod and reel setup. The drag, I like to use a certain amount of drag for different species. If I'm trolling for kingfish, I do not have my drag locked down, or I don't have it too tight. I have my drag more of like maybe like a 8 to 9 to 10 pound drag, like just enough to, if he hits it, he can run with it and he stays on. If not, where if he hits it, he can easily shake it off, or if he hits it and it's so hard that it rips his mouth and he's off. And that's targeting kingfish, right? If I'm targeting snapper, I'm dropping down. Sometimes if I'm up against a structure, I got thick line, I got thick mono, I'm using big knots, big hooks, and I'm gonna pull that sucker up. And I got big drag on him, and I want him away from that structure. Cobia, I'm probably fighting him not probably as a lockdown drag, but I'm fighting him with some pretty tough drag to just to end the fight. And then I always have a club on me because those guys can get real rowdy, especially if you're in a little kayak. But yeah, that's as far as my rod and reel setup. That those are the reasons why I use those rod and reels. What about you, Blake?
So before we get to Blake, so Merrill, I know you're bougie and all, and you have a Stella. So what's a lower a budget option for us peons out here who can't afford a Stella?
A Sedona, right?
I think no, definitely not a Sedona. Don't get a Sedona for offshore fishing.
A Saragossa is a good one.
Yeah, the Saragossa, I think it's a better option if you're looking at Shimano.
Well, you said low budget. I don't know how low budget you want to go, but
I definitely don't want to tell people don't tell people on this podcast go offshore with the little 4,000 size Sienna. You'll be fine, because that's not going to work, you know.
So I'd go with like a 5,000 Saragossa. If you want to get a little bit in between, they got the twin power, so that one's a good one too for spin rod. They also have some conventionals that are, you don't have to spend top dollar. Like I got the Talica ones. They got the Speedmasters or something like that you can use. So that's more budget friendly.
So what about you, Blake? What kind of setups are you usually sporting when you go offshore?
Well, I started off a long time ago. I was excited when they came out with those Penn 6500 LLs, and they were claiming that they were waterproof, and the back drag setup was not waterproof. And I kept getting, I kept having to take them in to get them redone because and clean, because they were taking water through the rear of it. Penn allowed me to switch them out for Penn 6500s, and they got the gasket on there, and it is completely waterproof, and I've had better luck with those. So, and I've got 6500s sitting in here. I like using those. I believe those Penn Battles I've seen people use. When it comes to like my heavy trolling rods, I mean the reels, I like to use Sieglers. Avits are great. Any of those. If you want a budget, you can get out with an Accurate, which is not a lot of money, or even as cheap as it is, $65, 75 ish. You can get out with a Penn 309. That thing's gonna run forever, but it's definitely not going to spool you, and it's going to take you a lifetime to get all that stuff back in. But I mean, for the budget, you'll have fun. You'll swear you had a whale on there and whatnot. But I mean, I've guided many people and said, hey, look, if you don't want to put a lot of money into it, get this. If you hate it, then you didn't lose a lot of money. If you love it, upgrade. And a lot of people have done that and stuff. So those are some of the ones I recommend in regards.
Like, why would you recommend upgrading? Like, get a good example, right? Like, why would you upgrade from a 309 to maybe something a little bit better, with better bearings, better components, and why would you do that?
Yeah, definitely better components all the way around. The warranty is usually better. Like even a Siegler, it's lifetime warranty, made in the U.S. You're going to also, like if it's, you're going to be able to get a hold of someone. Also, drag capacity on mine is like 40-ish pounds. So you're going to get better drag. A 309 is like 12 pounds and stuff. So it's just you're going to get that lovely sound going forever and stuff. But I mean, after a while, you can crank down on that lever drag, and that fish is going to go, what just happened here? Because you're going to stop him dead in his tracks and stuff. But there's just you're going to pay a lot more money for these things, but which hence the word upgrade. But it's a better quality all the way around, and there's just so many good reels out there. I mean, Siegler's not the only one. It's just I love them. I like to use them. But like I said, Avid and Shimano makes some good ones, Accurate, and so on and so on.
I will also mention, just from a kind of looking at it from the outside looking in, offshore is basically there. You have more opportunities for you to be overclassed in your gear compared to inshore, obviously, because there's a lot of bigger fish out there, and depending on what you're targeting, and having the right kind of gear is very important to have. It's to your success out there. And I guess another thing they consider too, compared to a boat, if you're on a boat, I know a lot of people like to offshore. They will use a rail to their advantage. Use the rail to provide leverage to pulling up their fish, especially if they have like a rod that may be too big for them or too heavy for them or whatever. And a kayak, you don't have a rail to provide leverage. You have to have the right gear to pull up those kings, those cobias, or even those snapper, whenever you're up against a rig. So
Right,
having the right gear is very important.
definitely. The tax man will remind you of that when you got
yeah.
that.
So here's one of the reels that I use. It's a Siegler LG, which stands for the large game. They also make an SG, which is adequate for out offshore. This one here, I believe, retails at $400. But again, you buy one of these, you're going to be able to catch anything out there, marlin, you name it. It holds an unbelievable amount of line. I've got 300 yards of 30-pound test on here, and I couldn't even begin to tell you how much for the top shot, but I just filled it up with Diamond Mamoy 30-pound, and these things are amazing out there. But when we say upgrade, it's an upgrade in every form, and they're easy to break apart too. You'd think by being more expensive, it'd be more complicated to break it down. You can go watch the videos on YouTube, and these things are remarkably easy to break down and clean and put back together yourself. And even if you don't, let's say you take it apart, and you don't know what you did wrong, put it in a bag, call them, let them know what you're doing. You send it to them, they'll put it back together, clean it up for you and everything, and they'll send it back to you. No big deal.
Well, I know there's one thing that a lot of people don't talk about. Like, you could go to YouTube, you can go. They really don't hone in on this topic. And I think it's probably the most important topic when you're offshore fishing, trolling for kingfish. We'll get into baits, but the most important thing is your rod, your reel. Not only that, the most important thing to me is your drag. And what kind of drag do you use, Blake? And why is it so important?
Well, you touched up on that a little bit, Merriel. I mean, if you got your drag set pretty tough, then what's going to happen is as soon as they hit it, they're going to either pop the hook out of their mouth, or they're going to break something, the line, the rod tip, or something's going to give, and it's not going to end well. Yeah. So, or something's going to break, and so I set my drag at a point to where I can let them run, but they're nowhere as close to spooling me. And even if it gets out of my top shot, I'm like, not even worried. I mean, you still got 300 yards to even come close. And the other thing is when you got lines set behind you and you got it so tight, to get it out of the rod holder in the back is going to be a task, much less trying to get it to the front so you can start reeling on that. So if you got that thing just hammered down, you're not going to be able to get that up there to you. So, that's another downside to it is, you're going to have to wait for them to quit running, turn around, or take a break or whatever. So, but you want them to run. And I like to put mine in the front because I can reach forward and grab it. The other one, I'm going to move to the back, and then I turn around, face them, do whatever. Sometimes I don't even I just turn the rudder control. And then as I'm holding the rod in front of me and he's bending it, he'll turn me, and I don't have to do any work and stuff. And so you just let them take the drag. And then when they start slowing down, I start cranking up on it until I at that point where I feel like they're kind of, hey, I'm done, and then it's my turn. And then when they get close, it's also important to know that you want to loosen your drag up a little bit, because if they go straight down, you're going to go in the water with them. Jonathan. So you want to let that line, because they're going to make those little mini tantrum runs, and especially even with sharks and stuff and cobia. I mean, if they go straight down, you're done for, man. I mean, you got to let that little loose, and if they take off, who cares, man? You'll get them back in after they're done. They'll lay on their side, the kings will, and they'll do that little circle and stuff, and then and then you can either tail it or gaff it, and then game over.
So you do let him hit your rod, and you let him just run. So when your drag's screaming, right, and he's running, you don't try to set the hook or nothing. You just let him run, right?
Let him run. As a matter of fact, I'm probably taking the other rod while he's doing his little number, and I'm reeling that one in a little bit. And because I like to bring mine out a little. Like if I'm in 40 foot of water, I probably got about 50 foot out, and I don't want it dragging on the bottom, letting hardheads, gaff tops, and every other species out there or stingrays take off with that. So I'll lift it up higher into the water column, set it back there, loosen the drag up, and then after that, it's go time with the other one. Usually by that time, this one's kind of done with this tantrum, and then I'm ready to start going to work with him.
That's it. And if you look on YouTube, you look anywhere, you're not going to find this information. I tried, right? Or maybe it's been like 3-4 years since I've looked for that information. I was one of the ones that struggled with catching kingfish, just because nobody was there to tell me to set the drag or how to set the drag. I had it too loose one time, so when they'd hit it, they'd run with it and they just spit it right out, because the drag was just way too loose and it never set the hook in their mouth. And regardless of how fast he was running and hitting it, the hook would just not penetrate with no drag.
It sounded good though.
Yeah, it sounded great, right? Right? It's like zzz, and then boom, it's gone. Like, well, what happened? And then the other one, I had it too hard, and it's like me. I run heavy. I run heavy on my gear. I can. I'll show when we go over baits, like why they'll never snap. Well, I've never had a snap on my leader line, and I think I explained it on one of the shows earlier. So I actually brought one of the lures, so I kind of learned the hard way on how to do it, and made a lot of mistakes. Typically, what I do in fishing, anyways, is make a lot of mistakes until I learn. But
when I set my lines out and I'm just letting it loose and dropping it out and stuff, I get it out to a certain point. Before I'm done and I set it in the rod holder, I'll set the drag a little bit, and then I'll pull on it to my specifications. And it's hard to show that on a video, but like when I do my safety meeting, I'll show people kind of so they can see that pull on here, so they can kind of get a feel of how much, and I can even, pass the rod around, and they can kind of, toy around if they need to, or they can come up to my kayak right before we launch and they can pull on it just to kind of get a feel. And then after that, it's just setting my clicker, and then, and then setting it in the rod holder and getting the other one out and stuff. But, I'll play around with that drag a little bit, I've done it so long. There's no numbers on these things to tell you, oh, set it at a 5 or a 15 or whatever. It's a feeling and stuff. So, that's how I do my drag. It's just, it's a feel on how I want it set.
We have a question, so I know we're going to get into this afterwards and get into some of the lures that we're using. But Bobby's asking, what have you guys noticed in rod lengths when fishing offshore in a kayak, and would you guys prefer a stiffer or softer rod?
Rod lengths, first of all, 6.5 to 7.5 is usually kind of, I would think the sweet spot for it. But you also want to make sure that it's something that can go around the front end of the kayak. If you're running something very short and that fish decides to go the other side, you're reaching out. I'm short. I'm 5'6". I got short arms, so I got to make sure that thing can go around the front end. And then, then there's ways to work around that, but you don't want to have to be hindered and handicapped with that situation. You want to be able to move it around to the other side and do that with it. So that's what I say in regards to rod lengths. Stiffer, softer, I'm kind of like a medium. I use Tiger sticks. I'm not fancy, man. I like that they're an 8-year warranty, and I use 7-footers. And it's a medium action on those Tiger sticks. They last. They're you go go on to YouTube and put in Tiger stick stress test, and they run like all the top brands, and they break each one of them and find out their threshold, and they all break. And the Tiger stick was the last one left standing. And then they said, oh, well, since it's the last one standing, let's just see how much more it can take before it breaks. And it took remarkably a lot more pressure before it finally reached its threshold and broke and stuff. So I'm like, hey, it's a little heavier out there on the water, but if it means keeping from breaking, I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, they make a good rod, those Tiger sticks. I think I got an old school one in my arsenal. Yeah, definitely something you can reach over the front of the kayak. I do also use a medium. And I think with the how I test the poundage on the line, I do what Blake does. It's a feel for me. And if you really want to know the poundage, I think you could put it on a rod, right? You put it on the weight. You tie it to a weight, and you put the 5 pound or you put the 10 pound. And when it starts reaching, I think that's how they test it. Is that right, Blake? They put 5 to 10 pound, and once it starts, ripping, okay, that's 10 pounds. But I mean, it's more of a feel for me. And I would be guessing it like 10 pounds or 7 pounds or something like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely reach over the rod or the nose of your kayak.
Awesome. So I know we can just keep going on forever, but let's go into some of the lures that that you guys use. Like for me personally, whenever I was offshore and fishing, I'd be using those really really large, those super extra large rattle traps. I didn't even know they made them that big until I saw one. I'm like, I had to have one, and it's just like the size of your hand. Those giant rattle traps, and of course those halcos. Those were my kind of go-tos when I was trolling. And usually I would make it, for me personally, I'd make a couple passes before around a rig, and then I'd go over to the rig itself and kind of position myself to fish for those whatever's around the rig. But what kind of lures are we using? And definitely want to see some of those for the kingfish. How you get those wire leaders on there?
Yeah, so I'm gonna do a little bit of show and tell myself. So I have a coated. I know one of the guy messaged me and said, "What do you mean by coated?" So this is coat around the wire. And then I put a double crimp on it, right? So I put a double crimp. And if you look closely at my knot, that's the knot I use. I've never popped one. And Mark Baker is actually the one that showed me this rig. And he's a well-known offshore guy. And usually it's a bigger loop, but that one's kind of like a quick one. This is probably a better one. A better knot. You can see a lot better on that one. And what it is, for the guys that don't have that are watching this or listening to us, it's a loop, but instead of just 2 loops, it's wrapped several times in that loop, and then it's crimped, and then it goes around the eye ring, and then the same thing with the other end. Is this end of it? I do the same thing. I loop around it a couple times, and then I crimp it. And the reason I do that is because I have a swivel clip that I just clip onto this. And that way I could change out my bait so easily as I'm trolling. And I just clip those on and I'm on the next one. Clip the next. I can take that one off real quick, throw it in the box. And this is actually real popular. This is the Halco. This is probably the Max 130. I personally like this one and the 190. It's got some teeth marks on it, as you can see. These little dots right here are my guess of the little kingfish teeth. It's shiny. I guess you can't see really.
It just means it's well loved. So
yeah. This one right here, I need to change out the hooks. It's missing a hook on it. But this one's, you definitely can see the marks on this one. This one's had better days. And this is my high side one. So this one dives about 1 to 2 feet and it rattles. I don't know if you can hear it. So it makes that knocking noise. And it just rattles. One of my favorite lures. I need to change the hooks on it. And then if I want to go down deeper, that's what the Halco I use. I use the 130 Max, and then I'll use the 190. Awesome. Those are my two baits that I like to troll as artificials. So I think we had more successful days trolling ribbon fish, but that last Friday was We weren't stopping at no bait store or nothing. That this is the one that I use. I caught one on this one, and I caught two on this one and the 190.
So
Or I
Blake,
caught one on the 190 and the 130.
I know you have some, so let's continue our offshore lure ASMR video that we have going on right now. Um, let's see what kind of lures are you using.
Okay, so the best thing you could ever do out there is to hook up to a blue runner using sabikis and stuff like that, and then being able to troll a blue runner. That's just candy bait. It even was the candy bait over in Los Buzos when we were talking to them about that. I was like, "Oh, blue runner, really? Same thing over here as it is over in Texas. Great." You just can't beat a blue runner. I mean, from there it goes down to other species, including sand trout and whatnot. But you just can't beat that. But when you don't have that opportunity, or you're not finding the live bait that day, ribbon fish is usually, I mean, I've only had a handful of days where ribbon fish just wasn't working and I went straight to lures. But I'm going to show y'all how to tie one in just a second, which I won't show it to you as a whole until I'm done, so you'll get to see it being made and the finished product. But trolling ribbon fish is generally the best thing out there on the water. They love it. Merriel did mention Halcos. This is Glenn Madden. Professor Salt is the master at kingfish out there. He has a great video for tying kingfish leaders, which I pretty much use the same thing. I mean, if it's not broke, why fix it? Been tying it for years. And I use a slightly different line now than the Malin wire, but today I'm going to, for simplicity purposes, I'll show you how to tie Malin wire. But I do use a Halco Max 110. I do have some 130s, but this is the Max 110, same one that Professor Salt uses, and you can get them on Amazon as well as Roy's Bait and Tackle down in Corpus Christi. So these are awesome. Another go-to, which I absolutely adore, is the Deep Diver by Yozuri. You ask, well, how deep? Look on their website. The longer, I mean, not how deep, but how long, the longer, the better. I mean, and I love this redhead design. I mean, they just go after this. I mean, I've used the pink, I've used the blue, the greens and stuff. But this just seems to be the money color right here. Don't need to use the jointed, just the deep divers. And, they're kind of expensive, but, I don't know. When I'm out of ribbons, I got to have something. This is what I go to, deep divers. These Halcos, going back to these for a second, kind of the same thing as what you were talking about, Jonathan, as far as doing like the big rattle traps. It's the same concept, it rattles. And whereas on the deep divers, in order to go down deep, it takes movement. Whereas these, in order to get it up in the water column, you have to have movement. It does just the opposite. So it just depends. These you can just leave dropped in the water while I'm bringing a fish, and they'll go after this. Whereas, maybe on my my deep diver, when I'm fighting the fish and I'm not moving, it's going to come up to the top. And sometimes they'll hit it on the top, but a lot of times, you're going to want that thing submerged down for them to see it and get to it and stuff. You mentioned poppers. On days you have flat, calm days, you throw on poppers. There are different assortments of poppers and stuff. This is a Yozuri bull popper. You can start popping that thing in the water. You will see kings going 10, 15 foot out of water trying to get these things. It is an amazing sight. I mean, it's like torpedo just shooting out of the water, and you got this thing hanging out of their mouth because they were going for it and stuff. So go to Professor Salt's page and type in chainsaw, kingfish chainsaws or something like that, and you'll see when the Australians were down and they were doing all that stuff, and you'll see these fish just popping out of the water. I've experienced it. It's a lot of fun, just doing it and seeing these fish go out of the water. Another thing I like to use, especially in bait balls and stuff, is I've got 1 and 3 ounce. These are the spoons, Castmaster spoons. I like the reflection on these things. You can buy them on Amazon, get them a 5-pack each. I used to buy them through Snapper Slapper, but they have been having a hard time finding them in stock over there. So I found Amazon carries them pretty freely. 3 ounce, 1 ounce, and everything's tied under wire leader. These toothy critters, unless you want to use heavy duty fluoro, 80, 100 pound or whatever, I'm tying to wire leader. So that's that. I guess getting into, if you go to Professor Salt's YouTube page and go into the how-to videos, you will see this video on there on how to tie these, but I'm going to do it in person. Again, if anybody ever has any questions on these, feel free to call me. My number is 832-588-7091. So when this goes on to YouTube, you can call me if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help. Have a lot of availability and time. But you got 9-inch on Malin wire for the 80-pound test, and you're going to tie what I call like a Lexus symbol, or bend it over with your finger. So I'm going to do the other side. I already pre-bent that one. So I'm going to take my finger out here, and I'm going to bend it to where it starts to make that angle. And then I'm going to try to go fast because I know we're running low on time. And then after that, put your, there you go. All right. From there, let me bend this screen down so we can get a better view of this. You're going to put your needle noses right there. And you're going to bend half of it down, 45, and half of it up. The trick is to twist both at the same time. If you don't, this starts to straighten out, and then you're just going around it, and then it's going to slip. If you twist them at the same time, and that takes about 2 or 3 times to learn and trial and error to finally get that straightened. I do it so naturally because I've been doing it for many years, and my fingers just self-adjust. So you're going to go 7 twists. So I'm going to go real fast just for time purposes. And as I'm tying, this thing is trying to unbend itself. But in the end, it still keeps that 45-degree angle. Now I'm going to cut this tag piece off the end here. So I'll do that real quickly. And it's going to be bent a little bit. You can just straighten that out with your pliers. And it's pretty straight. You do the same thing with the other side. Okay. So what you're going to do, I've already pre-done another one because you're going to have a treble hook on this side, and you're going to do the same haywire twist on the J hook. Okay. Just for saving on time. But when you go to connect, you want to make sure that what I call the Lexus symbol, you're not going to connect it through the haywire twist. You're going to connect it through the eye of the treble hook. Okay, so then you just, again, it's just a matter of tying the haywire twist, half down, half up. Whoops, and then 7 twists. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And this is for like ribbon fish and rigging that up.
Ribbon fish, yes, sir. Rigging your ribbon fish. Now, that's a good question here, because if I have, so far we've got this. We've got J, treble. And I'm going to be making, I've got a video made, but I got to edit it on how to rig up a ribbon fish. But this first J hook is going to go through the mouth and up through the nose part.
He's talking about let me help you out there. He's actually coming out of the bottom jaw of the mouth and coming out of the front top side of the nose of the ribbon fish.
Correct. One of the trebles is going to go through the back of the ribbons. Now, you don't want to pull it so tight that it looks like a board, but you don't want it so flimsy that it doesn't look natural. Just make it look comfortable when you're putting it on. Not too tight, not too loose, just kind of in the middle. One treble through the top of the back. Same thing with the other treble through the top of the back. Okay. Now,
as comfortable as a dead ribbon fish can be.
There you go. If I find I pull up a bait or someone says, "Hey man, you want this live blue runner?" I'm going to cut this back stinger off, and I'm going to hook this J hook through the bottom of the mouth and come out through the mouth itself, and I'm going to run this treble hook under the bottom belly and free line that sucker in the water and just let him go. Okay, that's if I have a blue runner, so I don't have to go out and go buy separate hooks and stuff like that. I'm just going to alter one to make it work. Now, going forward, we're almost done with this thing. From this J hook, we're going to use 61-pound malin wire. I've already made my pre-bend. Same thing as the treble hooks. You don't want to wrap it through the haywire twist. Okay, make sure you go through the eye of the hook. And again, for time purposes, I'm going to go really super fast because I already explained this part, and we're almost done with this. Half bend down, half bend up, 7 twists. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. And what I'm going to do just to save on this, I'm not going to put this whole thing together because I know we're going to run out of time. So what I'm going to do is just explain the rest of it, and I won't, because all you're going to do with the swivel at the end is make another what I call the Lexus symbol, and you're going to haywire twist that on. But you got 2 other little items. You've got a duster, and you're going to put that duster on first. I can do that. That's easy enough. Well, give me a second because it's kind of dark over here. There you go.
A duster is like similar to like a skirt, but this will be on the nose end of the fish.
Okay, so you got that. That's you're accessorizing your bait to look good for the fish. You know, kind of like how a woman accessorizes herself with makeup to look good for the man. Then you're going to use. I like to use 1/2 ounce, and I paint them. Fluorescent pink. Okay. And then you just put those on next. Can't see that well. Let me go into my light here. There we go. That'll go on top. Okay. And at the very top, you'll just put your swivel on, and then it's a done deal. And that's how you tie those on. I know some people that like to use different size weights for different column depths. My philosophy is and it just, whatever you want to do. There's no right or wrong to it. This is just what I prefer to do. I don't want to buy several different kind of weights because what happens if I run out of that weight and I was like, oh man, well then you're going to be improvising. Well, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm improvising. So I use 1/2 ounce all the way across the board. If I want that down deeper, I'm going to troll slower. If I'm going to want it higher up in the column, I'm going to troll a little faster, something within my means. I'm not going to be hustling and then wearing myself out. So that's what I've come up with. And all my stuff across the board is 1/2 ounce. No matter what, I can get it high enough for the column. I can get it down low into the column with 1/2 ounce. And that's how I do my ribbon leaders.
Awesome. And for those of you who are listening online on podcast, we are recording this live at facebook.com/One Last Cast podcast, as well as on YouTube. You can go ahead and search us up there and find this video, and you can kind of see what he's talking about. Also, would definitely highly recommend checking out Professor Salt's videos on YouTube. He's a really good resource for those of you getting into PTB. Definitely don't want to. I know we like to say that we try to keep these episodes an hour, but there's just so much information for us to keep going on. One question that we have on our chat right here, which is from Joshua. What's y'all's preferred pound test for mainline and leaders and clips?
I like to use 30. I used to use 65-pound test. I've downsized to 30 on the braid for the main line, and for the top shot, I'm 30. I'm not trying to horse them in. I'm just let them run themselves out. Then I'll bring them in. I've got plenty of drag on my things to bring them in. 30 does it.
I if I'm doing kingfish, I actually just stick to 1 pound, just because I use a lot of my offshore gear for different species. So I chase tarpon, I chase cobia, I chase snapper. So I do use 65, and then my with my leader line, I'm probably like at 25, 30, and then I'm using a 90-pound clip that can attach my whatever leader I want to put on there, whether I'm going for snap, or if I'm going for cobia, or if I'm going for kingfish, or if I'm using different lures, or if I'm using a trolling bait, a live bait trolling. So that's the poundage that I use. So I go 65 to 25 pound to 30 pound, or 25 to 30 pound mono.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to clip the voice of you saying that you use 1 pound line. Because you did say 1 pound. I'm like, no, you definitely did not use 1 pound. But it is definitely explained that you use 65 pound test, but you mean using it all across all of your rods and reels, because I
I don't
understand
even
that.
think they make one. Do they make 1 pound? If I make it
I'm
for
sure. I'm
flies,
sure that somebody probably does.
I
I
use
actually
one.
have on my ultralights when I'm go after redfish sometimes, and I've already caught my limit just to play around. I found 4 pound test, and I'll throw it out there just see if I can, get the redfish in on 4 pound test, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I have a 500 size reel with a 6 pound test that
So
I have not
I
pulled out in forever.
so I did lose a cobia on a rig when I had 30-pound test, and that's what made me switch to a higher one. He busted me off, so that's why I went up in choice. And then plus, when you're fighting 150-pound fish plus, you need that extra strength.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well,
do we have time to talk about radios, or are we out of time?
no, let's go ahead and power through this, because I definitely want to talk about radios. So let me set the stage. So for radios, they are a vital piece of safety equipment. Of course, we always highly recommend that you don't go out by yourself, and whether you're going inshore or offshore, try to go with a buddy. Um, and but one of the things I like about kayak fishing, when to go with a buddy, your you and your buddy will go and fish that same area, but you don't have to be right next to each other all the time. And one way to communicate with each other, especially offshore, we sometimes don't have cell signal, is have those offshore radios. Um, they you can find some really really cheap ones, and you can find some really nice ones. But when you're in a kayak, you definitely want one that's not only waterproof but also floats. Um, and just because it's waterproof does not mean it floats. That A lot of people make that distinction that, oh, it's waterproof so it floats. No, uh, if it floats, it's most likely waterproof. I can't. You can never say with 100% certainty, but it's generally that's the case. Um, and Because you want them floating, because if you flip over, something happens or whatever, um, you don't want it to be. You're giving it away to the bottom of the ocean. So, in your guys' experience, what kind of radios are you guys using? What brands? And what are we looking for?
I a lot of people like to use the Midlands and Cobras, and I mean they'll do, but a lot of people buy them because they're cheaper, and just because they're cheaper, there's always a caveat to that, and then you find out when you're on the water that, oh man, I now know why I save money, because it's not waterproof, or it's waterproof but it doesn't float, or it doesn't have this feature and that feature. So I try to stay away from those brands. And but people do get them, and that's fine. But I have found the most reliable brands out there to date are Standard Horizon, Uniden, and ICOM in no particular order. I've been using Standard Horizon for many years. I like the radio. I'm not fond of the customer service. This year I have, and I do have a Standard Horizon right here. Still works. It's not that old. It's an HX300. I've talked about those for years to people. I now went to an ICOM M73, and the cool thing I like about it, I saw a buddy of mine in PAC, Ken. He had this little extra feature on it, and I bought this. Love this thing. Put it in your PFD, lock it in right there. All you got to do is just clip it, and you don't have to pull it out. I'm going to get a better quality PFD than the one I have because it's not really meant for these. It's meant for the other style. And I can't, what I'm having to do is just put this part in my pocket down here. But a lot of these other ones have it to where you can just lock it right up here and then just lean over and then grab and hit the button and speak into it. A lot of times when I'm on my standard Ryzen, I'm out here and talking while it's down here, and people go, I can't hear you. You're too far away from it. Pick it up, and then I get up here, and then they can hear me. For some reason, this just right here, I lean over, and they can hear me just fine, and I love this. Now, this one here is a little bit pricey. You can get away with the lower version of this ICOM. I called their customer service. I was asking questions before purchasing this. I had no problems getting through to them, talking with them. It was amazing. And so this one was a little bit pricier. You can get away. I'd say a good quality is going to be $125, $150 unless you find it like on such days like right now, like Amazon Day and all that kind of stuff. This one here, the HX300 is about $150. For those of y'all, not literally, 150. Making sure people didn't misunderstand that, kind of like the 1 pound test a minute ago. Some of the things you're going to look for. 6 different things I have mentioned in one of my articles. If you go onto the thread that you posted up, Jonathan, if you scroll down and read through those, there's going to be an area. It's going to talk about 1, you're going to want that thing to float. Number 2, you're going to want it to be waterproof. 3, it should have NOAA weather radio. Believe it or not all of them have that. Again, a sacrifice for cheap. Hey, I'm paying less money, but hey, you're finding out later, I can't see the weather hear the weather on there because you don't have NOAA weather radio. Number 4, at least a 5-mile radius. Even though yours might reach out 5 miles, you're going to get further because the signal from the Coast Guard goes out way further. So you're going to still be able to hear them. Number 5, good battery life, extremely important. I've had days where I've started at 6 o'clock in the morning, didn't get off to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, still had good battery life. And number 6, making sure that you have the channel. Most of them already have this, but a channel 16 emergency button, so you can immediately go to that. So you're not thumbing down. Like our common channel we like to talk on is 69. But you don't need to go like 69, 68, 67, 66, 65 to try to get this 16 if there's an emergency. And I've had to use the emergency channel 3 different times. So you want to hit that button and it toggles right over to 16 and you can get with the Coast Guard immediately. So I think that's important. I might add a 7th one down the line. So I'll just go ahead and I'll talk about it right now. I think it's a great function. What they're doing now is they're adding the feature that it's got a little key on there and you hold it down and it'll make a sound letting you know that it's engaged, and the same thing for disengaging it. And when that key is engaged, when you go and you hit any other button, it's not going to do anything. A lot of times we'll be out fishing, our arm hits it, and all of a sudden you might switch to a different station. You're like, hey, Jonathan, where are you at? And you're like going, okay, well, maybe he's fighting a fish. I'll check him. Hey, Jonathan, Merriel, any one of you guys available? And you're not responding. About an hour or 2 later, you're like, I'm on channel 68. How did I get there? Well, you bumped it along the way and you just didn't realize it and stuff. So, by engaging that key lock, it makes it to where, and when you try to hit it, it'll make like a beep sound, letting you know that you did it. You hit it, but it's not going to change. And if you want to disengage it, you just hold it for a few seconds. The key on the display goes away, and you're back to where you can switch your stations or your volume or your squelch or whatever. And I think that's a great feature. Not all the radios have them, but I am really starting to fall in love with this ICOM M73. But those other 2 brands, Uniden and Standard Horizon, are good radios as well. Even though I'm not happy with the customer service with Standard Horizon, it's still a good brand. I mean, I'm not going to fault it for the radio itself. Some of the ICOMs, Merriel, you probably experienced this when you go through the surf and all of a sudden it's got water in there and you're trying to talk or you're trying to hear someone that just went through the surf, got a lot of water in there, and you really can't hear them that well because that water is sort of, it's all
muffled
embedded.
Yeah, muffled it real bad. Yeah.
It sounds like that when Charlie Brown, when the teacher's on there going like that, and you're like, what? Well,
that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Well, ICOM has a really cool feature that you hit the button and it vibrates to help get all that junk out of there. And I was like, dude, why hasn't anybody else thought of that and stuff? And so that's a really neat feature right there. And I've been excited about that and stuff. So, and I've yet to have to use it, but I've got that. And the ICOM's the only one. I don't know if that's a patented design or what, but they are the ones that have that. And I've had a lot of problems with Standard Horizon. I mean, I'm sitting there shaking it around, going, trying to blow on it and wipe it off and using my sleeve and, and it takes a while. Finally, it dries out. And then you can hear them about 2-3 hours later, when you're out there fishing. But these ICOMs, when I was out 5 days out at Los Buzos, that was my first time to use it. No problems. I even talked with a couple of people saying, hey, is everybody hearing me? Do y'all read me okay? Radio check. And everybody's like, hear you loud and clear. And I was like, dude, this is amazing. So I'm very pleased with the ICOM radio. So hopefully it stays like that. But those are my takes on the radio. Merriel, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, man, I just get the Ozark ones from Walmart. Those were two AA batteries. You're good to go. No, the bad thing. No, you do get what you pay for, right? I actually made the mistake of buying some cheap Walmart ones, and one of them doesn't work good, and the other one works if somebody else has a radio. And some of those are the problems you come across when you get the lower end ones. And there's a lot of cool features, and I think Blake pretty much covered most of it. So my favorite one, I know you don't like their customer service, but the standard or whatever it's called, it's kind of the ones that I like. Oh, that's the ones I don't know if I like using it. Those are the only ones that I've been really using going offshore. So, but I mean, communication is the most important part. The extra special features, depending on your pocketbook, but you get what you paid for.
Hey, Mark asks on there how much of the electronics and stuff. I would say, okay. More importantly, if you're new to kayak fishing, don't worry about all the GoPros and all the fish finders and stuff like that. Learn your kayak, learn the simplistic gear. Don't spend an arm and leg on all these lures at first. Just go out with ribbon fish leaders, make yourself about 10 of them, 10 to 12, and just get out there. If you can afford a little bit more, then fine. Grab all these things that Merriel and I are talking about, but you don't need all that stuff. There are going to be plenty of people out there, especially at Ball Pier. You don't need fish finders. Those are extra fun things for later. I fished many years without electronics on there. And then later on, after one day, I was like, man, I've been doing this a long time. It's time to break down and buy an entry level fish finder. So, and I still have my very first fish finder was a Lowrance Elite 4 HDI, and I've had that forever, and it still works and stuff. I mean, you got to take care of it. One of the biggest things is a lot of people like to when they get off the water, they like to pull that thing off immediately. I don't like pulling the wires off the back for a long time, because when you do, that's where that salt water gets up in there and stuff. And especially if, like me, I just leave my wires on. I leave it on the kayak while I'm going home, and I let it get the wind blow all that stuff off. And then if you want to take it off after that, that's fine. But if you immediately pulling that stuff off the water right afterwards, you're going to get salt in there, and that stuff's going to corrode, and then you're going to have to buy yourself another unit. Hopefully it's not the unit itself, and it's the wire, and you can go buy a wire cable, and then it's a little less expensive. But worry about the GoPros and stuff like that later. That's not necessary, Mark, not at this time. And I know Mark, he's more than welcome to call me. He's got my number. We can talk more in depth on that at his convenience.
Yeah, so for offshore, the only times I've ever needed it for me personally is whenever you're trolling, having a good GPS, because sometimes and of course I don't I have very limited experience offshore, but whenever you're trolling, like those halcos or those rattle traps, the one time I was out there where the GPS is very helpful, I found that it was like 70 yards away from the rig on like the left side of it or whatever side it was. I was getting more hits on that side, and understanding where I was at and redoing, making my circles smaller and smaller and just going around, because that's where the fish were. And so having that GPS is very helpful. Also, GPS is very helpful if you're way offshore, and you don't really need to worry about this with a kayak if you're launching from the beach or something, that you usually having understanding of where you're at. But if you get lost, you have an idea of which way to go. And the other thing too is if you're fishing deep reefs, um, obviously the rig is very easy because the rig is there. If you're fishing reefs, having a good GPS system to take you to those reefs and then seeing the bottom, obviously you would need that. But if you're a beginner, keep it simple. Like Merrill was saying with Martin, I believe who went without you on that trip. He only took one rod with him. Keep it simple on your first trip, and then eventually, as you get more experience, you can start developing your taking more stuff with you and bringing up your game and all that stuff.
That rig you were talking about, Jonathan, on the left side, was that the Mayan?
Yes.
I figured that left side is awesome, man.
I would if you're getting older in age, a good trolling motor and flat winds is always a good thing to have. I'm not gonna lie, been having a motor and I've been enjoying it, man, resting on my legs. Some of these guys, they paddle it. I used to paddle it. I no longer paddle now. I pedal. Now I don't pedal as much. I got the motor to take care of me. But
I knew it was coming.
Yeah, man, it's good living, bro. It's good living, man.
Went from paddle to pedal, then from pedal to 360 drive, and then from 360 drive, I was like, it's coming. I just know it. And then sure enough, you've got the trolling motor now.
I want it easy, easy like Sunday morning.
I'm a kayak purist, and I can see, well, a purist in regards to like it has to be human powered. So
he's still pedaling, right?
Yeah. I have a motor and I like it, but I think I'd rather stick to the pedaling part. So. Well, I know we covered so much ground today. Usually, like I said, we try to keep this an hour. Thank you, Blake, for joining us and sharing your knowledge on offshore and BTB and offshore fishing. Definitely would like to have you on again in the future to talk more about it. Maybe even after your next Los Buzos trip, recount and regale us with your stories of maybe that time you're going to catch that snapper that you guys are looking for. But thanks again. So let's kind of give a little bit more information on the Bob Hall trip, just very quick, for those who are still looking. So tell us about that, Blake.
Okay. If you go on to www.texaskayakfisherman.com, go to the BTB Beyond the Breakers section. It's a post at the very top. It's a pinned topic. It never leaves the top. You click on that, and before the thread even starts, up the top, it's color coded and it's date stamped, and it talks about the updates. And so I update Sunday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. It's this Saturday, but it's not looking good. But I will make the final update come Thursday. And if it doesn't work on Saturday, then we move it each day until we find a quality day to get out and that I feel safe for everybody. And again, we'll all the details of where it's at, where we meet, what time, safety meetings, all that stuff is posted on that website. It's a long thread, but there's a lot of information in there. And hopefully we'll be able, if not the Saturday, hopefully it'll come real quick.
Awesome. So I know for those of our listeners out there, definitely check that out. And I know some of y'all have been asking when we're going to do some more inshore content, and we're going to do that our next episode. So stay tuned for that. Blake, again, thank you so much for joining us. And let's give another shout out to our sponsors before we head off. DSKA, Dirty South Kayak Anglers. If you're looking for a Facebook page to join, talk about kayak fishing, definitely go to DSKA. On Facebook, we have 4A Printing. They do our custom towels. Just go talk to Aaron. He'll get you hooked up with towels, shirts, and other stuff that he has. And of course, Knocking Tail Lures, our favorite soft plastics on this show right here. They are great for trout, redfish, and flounder, which we will probably talk about on our next episode. Again, we are live every other Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time at facebook.com/One Last Cast podcast. Merrill, before we head off, leave us some parting wisdom, and let's end it on that note.
Well, I don't know if I got any wisdom to give today, but just, guys, stay safe. Try to head out in low winds and below 1 to 2 foot swells. Preferably flat would be your best time. And stay tuned with Blake in here. He will guide us in the right direction.
Awesome.
trip.
So you guys have a good one. And for those listening out there, tight lines, good luck fishing, and we'll see you out there.